The lights weren't just bright, they were blinding. Behind the shimmering glass of Studio 12B, the control room pulsed with life. Technicians with headsets juggled switches and cues like surgeons mid-operation. The show's opening theme swelled. Through the speakers, clean, iconic, a blend of steel piano and snare drums. It was time America's most watched talk show wasn't known for subtlety. Straight Talk Live with Cassandra Knox had become a household name for three things: sharp questions, zero filters, and the unshakable disbelief of its host. Cassandra, smart, composed, and famously atheist, had skewered pastors, politicians, even actors who dared bring God into the conversation. And tonight, she was about to interview Elon Musk. Not about rockets, not about AI, but about something far more volatile in modern America: faith. Elon sat quietly in the green room. The chair was a little too soft, the bottled water untouched on the table beside him. His assistant had tried to prep him. "Just stick to tech, Elon. Avoid religion." "She'll bait you." But Elon hadn't answered. Instead, he reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a small silver chain. A cross, simple and well-worn, hung from it. He looped it over his head in one smooth motion. No press knew about it. He didn't wear it in interviews. He didn't need to. But tonight felt different. Someone knocked. A producer peeked through the door. "You're on in 60. Elon stood up. The chain disappeared beneath the collar of his crisp, dark blazer, but it was there, resting just over his heart. He looked into the mirror, not for vanity, not for nerves, just to see, one last time, if he still recognized the man staring back at him. The stage was a theater in itself. Cassandra Knox sat confidently in her signature midnight blue suit, one leg crossed over the other, chin lifted. The audience, a curated mix of fans and skeptics, buzzed with anticipation. Every eye turned as Elon Musk entered stage left. The applause was thunderous, half from respect, half from morbid curiosity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cassandra purred, "please welcome the man who might take us to Mars, if he doesn't blow up the Earth first, Mr. Elon Musk." Laughter, then more applause. Elon offered a small smile and nodded. He sat down, shook her hand. The music faded. Cameras zoomed in. And like that, the nation watched. The first 5 minutes went exactly as expected. Questions about Neuralink, SpaceX delays, his cryptic tweets. The audience laughed, Cassandra poked. Elon danced around it all with trademark wit. Then came the shift. "So, Elon," Cassandra said with a glint in her eye, "there's something I can't ignore tonight." She leaned in slightly, voice lower. "Is that a cross?" The camera. Cut to Elon. The audience chuckled, uncertain. Elon didn't flinch. "It is." Cassandra raised a perfectly shaped brow. "Didn't take you for the religious type." "I'm not religious," he replied simply, "but I do have faith." A few in the crowd murmured. Cassandra's smile widened. "Faith in what? The simulation? The multiverse? Or is Elon Musk, the man of science, telling us he believes in God?" More laughter. But it wasn't mocking, not yet, just curious amusement. "I believe in something bigger than me," Elon said calmly. "And sometimes that's enough." Cassandra leaned back, arms folded. "You've survived bankruptcy, lawsuits, rockets exploding midair, and now you credit a higher power?" There it was, the edge in her voice, the bait, the challenge. Every viewer at home leaned forward. And for the first time in the interview, Elon Musk went completely silent. He didn't answer right away. The silence hung like fog over a field, thick, still, heavy. Then Elon looked up, not at Cassandra, but at the audience. "I wasn't always like this," he said quietly. The room tensed. "I wore this," he tapped the cross beneath his shirt, "for the first time when I was 17. It belonged to someone I loved, someone I lost." Cassandra's face twitched, almost imperceptibly. "She gave it to me in a hospital room," he continued. "She said, 'You won't understand now, but one day when things get dark, hold on to this.'" The audience was no longer smiling, not even Cassandra. I didn't listen. For years I ignored it, called it nonsense, even mocked it, just like I'm being mocked now. He paused. The silence wasn't fog anymore, it was weight. But then one night, years later, I was alone, lost. Everything I had built was falling apart. And I found it. In a drawer. Still tangled, still cold. And I put it on. A single breath. And that night I didn't fix the world. I didn't save my company. I didn't solve anything. His voice cracked, just slightly. But I made it through the night. Cassandra didn't speak. Not right away. Her fingers twitched slightly on the cue card she no longer looked at. Her eyes weren't on Elon now, but somewhere beyond him. Somewhere far. The audience could feel it. Something had shifted. And Elon? He leaned back in his chair. Calm, composed, not angry, not even smug. Just peaceful. Faith, he said, isn't about answers. It's about survival. The cameras kept rolling, but the script was gone. Whatever this show was, supposed to be. It had changed, and neither Cassandra nor America would be the same again. The overhead lights dimmed ever so slightly as the production team shifted camera angles. Cassandra Knox tilted her head with that signature poise of hers, the kind of gesture that always preceded a knockout question. The studio audience held its collective breath, sensing a brewing storm beneath the calm. She had poked fun before, danced with sarcasm, but this time it was personal. So, she said, lips curling into a polished smile, what you're saying is, science failed you and superstition saved you? A ripple ran through the crowd. It was a clean strike, cold, precision-guided, delivered with the surgical finesse of a talk show veteran, and she knew it. Her eyes gleamed, not cruelly, but with the confidence of someone who believed they'd just exposed the weakness in a titan's armor. Elon didn't blink. He leaned forward, resting, his elbows lightly on his knees, the calm still intact. But this time there was steel in his voice. No, he replied, science didn't fail me. But science can't hold your hand at 2 a.m. when you're watching someone you love slip away. Equations don't hug you when you're broken. The words echoed. Cassandra's smile faltered. Just a breath, just a flicker. But it was enough. She had expected him to deflect, maybe even bristle. Instead, he countered with something more disarming than intellect, vulnerability, and it unnerved her. For a woman who prided herself on cutting through pretenses, Cassandra Knox had a talent for finding the emotional Achilles heel in others. But Elon hadn't offered one. He laid bare something else, an unguarded truth. Still, she wasn't ready to let it go. Okay, she said, voice laced with that smooth skepticism that had made her famous. So you wear a symbol of your past. I get it, but isn't it dangerous, even irresponsible, for someone with your influence to promote faith to millions? There was the old Cassandra again, razor-sharp and poised for the final blow. But Elon didn't flinch. Instead, he shrugged, lightly. People don't need me to tell them what to believe, he said. But maybe, just maybe, then they need permission to admit that belief and intelligence aren't enemies. The crowd was shifting again, not in restlessness, but in reconsideration. You could feel it. The murmurs weren't sarcastic anymore. They were thoughtful, weighted, curious. Somewhere in the back row, a middle-aged man in a NASA hoodie folded his arms and leaned forward. A young woman near the front wiped something from her cheek. The studio was transforming, not physically but emotionally. The tension was no longer between the host and the guest. It was within the viewers themselves. Cassandra sat still. For the first time in her career, she felt a strange sensation rising. Not embarrassment, not defeat, but doubt. She didn't like it. You know, she said, trying to redirect, I've interviewed hundreds of people, senators, scientists, pop stars. Almost every one of them carries some kind of belief. But I've always found it fascinating how often that belief is inherited pain. The line hung there, elegant, dangerous, a loaded statement if there ever was one. Elon studied her, and then, gently, is that what you believe your faith was? A pin could have dropped. The question wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even calculated. It was human, and that somehow made it cut deeper than any insult. Cassandra opened her mouth, but no words came out. For a second, just a single heartbeat, her eyes betrayed something rare on national television. Vulnerability. But she masked it fast. I think we're here to talk about you, she said sharply, trying to regain the high ground. Not me. Elon nodded slowly. Maybe. But conversations don't work one way. And if we're really talking about faith, then maybe it's not about proving something. Maybe it's about admitting we've all needed something, anything to help us through. Silence again. This time, not heavy, but thoughtful, reflective. Cassandra looked down at her cue cards. They were now useless. Her entire script had derailed. The control room flicked to camera 3, pulling in close on her face. And for the first time in her broadcasting career, millions of viewers saw something unexpected in her polished composure, confusion, conflict, maybe even regret. "You're not what I expected," she finally said, almost under her breath. Elon smiled faintly. "Most of us aren't." And with that, he leaned back into his seat, crossing his legs with ease. Not triumphant, just still, solid, at peace. Cassandra exhaled slowly, quietly, not into the mic, but to herself. The applause light never came on. No one prompted the audience, but one by one, people started clapping. Not loudly, not theatrically, just respectfully. And as the commercial break approached, Cassandra sat there, staring at her guest, or maybe not at him, but through him, to something she hadn't let herself feel in years. The applause faded like a tide pulling back from the shore. The room, now heavy with something unspoken, waited for the next move. Cassandra Knox shuffled her cue cards, not because she needed to, but because it gave her hands something to do. She was rattled, and everyone knew it. She glanced at the floor manager, who silently mouthed, "Back in 10. A countdown ticked on the monitor. 9, 8, 7. Cassandra took a breath, but not the usual camera-ready inhale. This one was deep, slow, human. When the red light blinked on, and the show returned live to millions of screens, her voice carried a new tone. Less combative, more contemplative. "So Elon," she said, her eyes narrowing not in judgment but curiosity, "you mentioned someone gave you that cross, someone who passed. Do you want to talk about that?" The question was unexpected. From anyone else it would have been soft. But from Cassandra it was a surrender, a white flag that didn't wave in defeat, but in mutual understanding. Elon looked at her, then at the studio audience, and finally, at the camera, at the sea of unseen faces watching from couches, offices, hospital rooms, and airports, and he nodded. "She was my first real friend," he said. "Not someone who cared about tech, not fame, just someone who saw me." His voice didn't waver, but something behind his eyes shifted, a tremble in the steel. Her name was Anya. Cassandra sat back, surprised. Elon Musk was telling a story. Not about Mars, not about profits, but about a girl named Anya. "We met when I was 17, he said. "I had just moved again. New school, new everything. I didn't fit in. I was that weird kid in the back of the room scribbling code and theories in notebooks, while everyone else talked about football and prom." A chuckle from the crowd, light and warm. "She was in my chemistry class, sat next to me. First day, she tapped my shoulder and asked if I believed in God." He smiled at the memory. Cassandra's eyebrows lifted. "I told her, 'No, I believe in math.'" Another round of laughter. She laughed and said, "Maybe God invented math." I thought that was dumb. But she kept saying it every time we argued about science, or existence. And we argued a lot. He paused. But it was the kind of arguing you miss when it's gone. Cassandra watched him with an unreadable expression. No smirk now, no quip. She was listening, truly, Elon continued. A few years later she got sick, fast, aggressive, the kind of illness that doesn't ask questions, doesn't wait for answers. I visited her almost every day near the end. He reached under his shirt and pulled the silver cross out gently, letting it hang over the dark fabric. She handed me this the day before she died. Said she wore it every day, even when I made fun of her for it. Silence filled the room. Thick, real. She said, "You'll need this more than I ever did." I laughed. Told her I didn't believe in that stuff. She just smiled. She always smiled. Cassandra looked down, blinking once. A part of her wanted to move on, switch to safer ground, but the other part, the deeper, buried part, wanted to stay. "She changed you," Cassandra said quietly. Elon nodded. "She gave me something science couldn't explain. Not data, not answers, just meaning. That's what faith was for her. And I didn't get it until she was gone." He looked at the camera again, directly into it this time. "And sometimes, I still don't get it. But I wear this for her, because every time I feel lost, every time I think I've failed, this reminds me of someone who saw me when I didn't see myself." The control room hesitated. Normally the show would cut to commercial, but no one moved. The producer whispered into Cassandra's earpiece, "Do we go to break?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat tightened, not from emotion she could name, but from something ancient. Something she hadn't let herself feel since she was a girl, sitting in the back of her own childhood church, staring at a stained glass window and wondering if anyone was listening. "Thank you," she finally said, voice softer than anyone had heard on her show, "for sharing that." Elon gave a small nod. "Not many people do," she added. "Maybe that's the problem," he replied. The audience didn't clap. They didn't need to. A stillness, a collective reverence, had taken over the room. For a few minutes on national television, there were no debates, no gotchas, no sound bites. Just two people, one known for rockets, the other for rants, sharing something far more dangerous and more beautiful. Honesty. The studio lights hummed gently above, casting a halo over the host's desk. But in that moment, Cassandra Knox didn't feel like a host. She didn't even feel like herself. She felt like the little girl she used to be. For the first time since the interview began, Elon wasn't the one under the microscope. The room's invisible spotlight had shifted, and Cassandra, always in control, always the one steering the narrative, was struggling to hold the wheel. When the show returned from break, there was no witty comeback, no new segment, just Cassandra sitting still, fingers laced, her gaze no longer aimed at Elon, but at the floor in front of her. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Something had changed. Everyone could feel it. Elon waited, and then it happened. "My grandmother wore a cross too," Cassandra said suddenly, voice low but clear. "She never took it off." Elon looked at her, quietly, without interruption. "She used to sing hymns to me when I was little," she continued, her eyes growing distant. "Every Friday night after dinner, she'd sit by the window with her Bible, and I'd pretend to be annoyed. But I'd always sit nearby, just close enough to hear." She smiled, barely, a sad kind of smile. "She died the night before I got accepted into my first news internship. I was 17. I never told anyone, but I buried her cross in the field behind our house the day after her funeral." A wave of stillness moved through the crowd. Elon's voice was gentle. "Why?" Cassandra didn't answer right away. "I think I was angry," she finally said. "Not at her, at the idea that someone could be that good, that faithful, and still just vanish." Her words hung in the air like a ghost. Elon nodded, eyes filled with something more than understanding, recognition. "I told myself I'd never be that naive," she continued. "So I built something else, this show, my brand, my armor." "And it worked," Elon said softly. Cassandra let out a short breath. Too well. There was no audience clapping, no laugh track, no music. Just two people sitting in silence, peeling back layers most of us never dare to touch. "I mocked you earlier," Cassandra said, turning toward him now, "about that cross, about your faith. I thought I was being clever, but really, I think I was just scared." Elon didn't speak. He didn't need to. "I haven't talked about my grandmother in years," she continued, voice cracking just slightly. "I guess I buried more than just her cross." There it was, the wall, cracked open for the first time in decades, not just for Elon or the audience, but for herself. And maybe for the first time in her career, Cassandra Knox didn't feel powerful or polished. She just felt real. Elon leaned forward, resting his hand gently on the edge of the table, not touching hers, but close enough to offer something wordless. "She'd be proud of you," he said. Cassandra looked away, blinking rapidly. "I'm not so sure." "I am," he replied, because this, what you just shared, takes more courage than anything I've ever done in a boardroom. From the control room, the producer's voice crackled softly in her earpiece. We need to cut. Soon. Sponsors are waiting. She ignored it. I used to pray, she whispered. When I was little, in the dark. I'd press my palms together and whisper into the night like someone was listening. She looked up, her eyes wet but steady. Maybe I wasn't talking to no one. A beat of silence, then Elon said, maybe you still aren't. The audience didn't move. They were witnessing something far rarer than drama or celebrity gossip. They were witnessing transformation. The sun had barely risen over the Pacific when the first clips hit social media. 10-second bites, looping GIFs, hashtags erupting like wildfire. By 7 a.m., Cassandra Knox and Elon Musk were the top global trend across platforms. Not for a feud, not for a scandal, but for a moment, raw, unscripted, and painfully human. Did you see Cassandra cry? That was the headline. A viral tweet racked up 2 million likes in 3 hours. Not a fan of Elon or Cassandra, but that interview last night? Damn. That was real. That was different. A Reddit thread titled, "This Elon interview changed." My view of faith soared to the front page. The comments were flooded not with the usual debates or snark, but with stories. One user wrote, I'm agnostic, been for years, but when Elon talked about Anya, it hit me. Hard, like someone who's also lost someone and still wears their ghost. Another added, Cassandra's confession. I didn't expect that. She reminded me of my mom. Tough on the outside, broken underneath. Clips of Cassandra's quiet admission, I buried her cross, and Elon's gentle reply, she'd be proud of you, were posted and reposted. TikTok edits paired the scene with soft piano scores. Teens who'd never watched her show were now discussing forgiveness, grief, belief, and something no one expected, redemption. The studio's phone lines melted at Global Talk Studios. Cassandra's producer, Maya, was fielding calls non-stop. Sponsors were confused. Ratings executives were euphoric. But more than that, viewers were moved. We've never seen engagement like this, Maya told the team. Not even when we had a senator cry on air. This isn't controversy. This is connection. Cassandra's inbox was a mix of stunned silence and heartfelt notes, from strangers, from people she hadn't spoken to in years, from one particular contact labeled Mom, with just a 3-word message. I remember Grandma. Elon's team. Overwhelmed, his assistant sent screenshots of the internet exploding. Messages poured in. Physics student from Istanbul. I used to think you were just a robot billionaire, but now I see the man. A single mother from Indiana. I wear my husband's necklace every day. He passed last year. I never understood why until tonight. Even a prominent atheist YouTuber posted a reaction video saying, I disagree with Elon on almost everything. But damn, that was the most honest I've ever seen him. Corporate world versus human world, ironically. Some board members were nervous. You got emotional on air, one senior investor texted Elon. That's not your brand. Elon didn't respond. Instead, he tweeted one line, sometimes the truth needs no brand. It received 12 million likes. The church doors reopened. Across the country, pastors, rabbis, and chaplains were resharing the interview. Some called it a miracle in prime time. Others just said, finally, a conversation worth having. Youth groups watched it together. Book clubs turned their next meeting into a discussion about faith and doubt. And in one small church in rural Georgia, an old woman wearing a worn silver cross looked at her granddaughter and whispered, he reminded me of your father. Cassandra's silence. For 24 hours, she posted nothing. No reaction, no tweet, no carefully worded statement, just silence. It wasn't fear, it was processing until the following night. She returned to her studio. Same lights, same set, but this time no audience, just her, one chair, one mic. She looked directly into the camera and said, something happened on this show last night. Something I didn't plan. I came in with questions and left with a memory I thought I'd buried. A pause. I don't know what faith means yet, but I know what it feels like when someone believes in you. Elon did that, my grandmother did that, and maybe it's time I learn how to do that too. Fade to black, the cameras were gone. The lights, the stage, the studio, all left behind. Elon Musk stood alone in the chapel of a small mission, church just outside Los Angeles. No press, no advisors, no digital footprint. Just him and a memory, a visit to the forgotten. The place was quiet. Dusty wooden pews, a faint scent of candle wax in the air. The kind of silence that felt sacred, not empty. This wasn't a PR stunt. No one knew he was there. But in the wake of the viral storm, he needed to be somewhere that didn't ask anything of him. He sat in the back row, folded his hands, not to perform, not to explain, but to remember. The woman who changed everything, Anya, his mother's name, she wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. But she was the reason he ever looked up at the stars in the first place. When he was a boy in Pretoria, South Africa, it was Anya who'd place a candle in the windowsill during storms and whisper, "Light always returns." It was Anya who gave him his first book on physics. And his first crucifix. He never forgot either. But somewhere along the way, and between rockets and empires, he'd hidden that cross in a drawer, the private faith of a public genius. The world knew Elon Musk as many things: innovator, disruptor, egomaniac genius. But what they didn't know, what he barely let himself know, was that the more he tried to conquer the stars, the more he missed the woman who told him the stars were part of something bigger. She didn't argue about theology. She just believed. Even when he stopped, Cassandra's words haunted him. Maybe I wasn't talking to no one. Those words from the interview echoed in his head, over and over. A loop he couldn't shake. For the first time in years, he began to wonder, was I wrong to stop talking too? And worse, was I afraid to listen? Science and faith, a false war. He once said, "I believe in facts, not fairy tales," but now he wasn't so sure they were mutually exclusive. Was it possible that both could coexist, that equations could explain the how, but faith could explain the why? That building rockets didn't mean God didn't exist. That maybe, just maybe, or there was a design behind the chaos. A hidden journal back at his Bel Air home, Elon opened an old drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a black leather journal, untouched since his mother's funeral. He flipped to the first page, his handwriting shaky. 12 years ago. Dear Mum, I don't know where you are. I hope it's beautiful. I hope you're proud. I'm scared of becoming something you wouldn't recognize, but I'm also scared of not becoming everything you believed I could be. He stared at it for a long time. Then, without thinking, he wrote something new beneath it. I spoke about you on TV yesterday. I didn't expect to, but I think you heard me. A new kind of mission. He wasn't about to start quoting scripture or leading prayers at SpaceX. That wasn't who he was. But he was about to do something radical for himself. He wanted to meet people of faith again, not as skeptics or enemies, but as humans. He wanted to hear their stories. He wanted to listen without needing to fix. And deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, he wanted to feel her again, his mother, his anchor, his cross. The World Notices a tweet appeared the next morning. Visited a small church today. Not for answers, just for silence. Sometimes the most powerful moments have no algorithm. It was simple, unmarketed, yet within hours, faith leaders, skeptics and followers alike began debating, was Elon Musk changing? Cassandra watches in silence across town. Cassandra Knox sat on her couch watching the world buzz. She didn't comment. She didn't retweet. But she clutched something in her palm. Her grandmother's cross, the one she had once buried. It had been exactly 8 days since the interview that broke the internet, and in that time everything had changed, not just for Elon Musk, not just for Cassandra Knox, but for millions of people who watched a high-profile takedown turn into a moment of awakening, and one that neither of them planned. Now, as the shockwaves settled, something new stirred in the quiet. A calling neither expected, a letter without a return. Address: Cassandra sat at her kitchen table, sipping bitter coffee she forgot to sweeten, flipping through a stack of mail mostly, filled with noise, brand pitches, hate mail, redemption arcs in envelope form. But one envelope stood out. No name, no stamp. No return address, just her name. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, feminine, strong. You didn't lose her. You just stopped listening. She's still speaking, through you. There was no signature, but Cassandra knew. Somehow, she knew. It was her grandmother's handwriting, or someone who had known her. Remembered her, loved her. She clutched the note like a lifeline. Across the country, Elon was restless. In his Palo Alto home, surrounded by prototypes and plans for Mars, Elon couldn't focus. His thoughts kept spiraling back to one word. Why? Why had he shared what he did? Why had it felt so right? And why did he feel like that conversation had opened a door he didn't know existed? Or worse, one he'd locked years ago. The answer came not through a press release or tweet, but through an unexpected voice message from a name he hadn't seen in years. Father Callahan, the priest who had once blessed his mother's coffin. The message: Elon, I saw your interview. I cried, not because you were weak, but because you were brave. You spoke like a son who still believes she hears him, and I promise you, she does. Come visit. No cameras, no expectations, just come. 2 paths. One pulled. Cassandra stood by her window, the note trembling in her fingers. Elon paced the edge of his lab, his mother's journal pressed to his chest. They didn't know it yet. But they were on the same road, and soon they'd meet again. The church with the broken bell, it wasn't famous. It wasn't trending. It wasn't even listed on Google Maps. But this little stone chapel at the edge of the Mojave Desert held something neither of them could explain, and by fate or divine timing, both of them, without knowing the other would come, found themselves walking its dusty path at sunset. No cameras, no crowd. Elon arrived first, stepping out of his sleek, silent EV, standing there like an alien in a monastery. Cassandra arrived moments later in an old borrowed truck. Jeans, no makeup, hair in a bun, unrecognizable to the world that had turned her into a meme. Their eyes met. No words, just recognition of the pain, the confusion, and the hope. The priest who waited, Father Callahan, opened the doors without question. He didn't greet them with scripture or sermon, just this: you both came here chasing something. Maybe it's not answers, maybe it's just permission to believe again. The conversation that wasn't televised. For 3 hours, they sat beneath a cracked stained glass window, telling stories of love, of loss, of science, of silence, and most of all, of the moments that haunt them still. Elon spoke of Mars with reverence. Cassandra spoke of her grandmother's prayers. They didn't argue. They listened, really listened. 1 candle, 2 flames. As night fell, Father Callahan lit a single candle and placed it on the altar. I don't know if either of you are ready to call this faith, he said, but I do know, when 2 souls search for light, they usually find it. Elon struck a match. Cassandra steadied the flame. 2 candles. Side by side, flickering in a chapel that had almost been forgotten. The wind howled softly outside the chapel walls, whispering secrets through broken panes of stained glass. Inside, the candle flames trembled, but held their ground, like 2 people sitting quietly with the weight of the world on their shoulders, not knowing which path to take. Elon Musk, Cassandra Knox. One was a titan of technology. The other, a voice of broadcast cynicism. Now both were facing something far more daunting than ratings or rockets: conviction, and the terrifying idea that maybe, just maybe, they were being called to something greater than themselves. For me, fork in the road by morning, they each stood at a different kind of crossroads. Cassandra returned to the city and was met with a storm she hadn't anticipated. The network wanted a follow-up. Your redemption arc is hot, the exec said. We want a part 2, same set, more emotion, maybe cry again? She stared at them in silence. She wasn't a puppet, not anymore. Meanwhile, Elon sat in a glass-walled boardroom with SpaceX engineers, watching simulations of a Mars payload launch. But his mind drifted, not to orbit trajectories or carbon yields, but to the way Father Callahan had said his mother's name. Anya believed in you not because of your genius, the priest had said, but because you still looked for wonder. He couldn't shake it. He didn't want to. The offer 2 days later, Cassandra received a hand-delivered envelope. Not from a studio. From Elon inside was a handwritten note and a business card. I'm building something, but not in steel, not in code, something that might outlast both. I want you to help me tell the story. Below it, the name of a new foundation. The Anya Initiative, a center for science, ethics, and spiritual dialogue. Wait, Elon Musk was starting. A church? No, not a church. Something more dangerous, a conversation, a movement. A place where faith and logic weren't enemies. They were partners. Where a kid could learn about dark matter and also be told it's okay to pray. Where an atheist and a believer could sit at the same table and instead of arguing ask, what if we're both just trying to find the same light? Cassandra's dilemma. She could take the job, walk away from global talk, become the voice of something new, but it meant risking everything. Her brand, her platform, her carefully built wall of sarcasm and defiance. She stared at Elon's card for hours, then she whispered aloud, what if the cross I buried wasn't hers, but mine? Elon's risk. He wasn't trying to convert the world. He just wanted to honor the one person who never made him choose between the stars and the soul. He poured millions into the foundation. No press releases, no campaign. Just quiet funding and a deep hope, and a message to Cassandra. I can build the walls, but you have to light the fire. A late-night broadcast Cassandra went live on her personal stream for the first time ever. No studio, no hair team, just her and a camera. I spent most of my life mocking things I didn't understand. I confused intelligence with cynicism, but something happened. Someone reminded me that being smart doesn't mean being numb. A pause. She held up Elon's note. I'm not quitting media, I'm redefining it. I'm joining something bigger. And if I'm wrong, at least I'm wrong while reaching upward. The internet erupts again. Anya Initiative. Cassandra reborn. Elon and faith trending globally within the hour. Debate sparked. Some called it a cult, others called it revolution. And a quiet wave of young creators, teachers, thinkers, people raised in a war between belief and reason, began whispering, finally. Maybe I don't have to choose. The final crossroad days later, Cassandra stood once again at the chapel door. This time Elon was already inside, waiting, not as a billionaire, not as a legend, but as a man carrying a candle. He looked up at her and smiled. So, you ready to build something with no blueprint? She stepped forward, her grandmother's cross now gently resting at her throat. Only if you promise we don't fake the miracles. Elon laughed softly. No faking, just faith. And together they walked into the next chapter. It was a warm evening in Austin, Texas, unusually still. The city buzzed with tech launches and university debates, yet on the outskirts, something new was rising. Not a building, not a machine, not a movement advertised on billboards, something quieter, but louder in meaning. The first gathering of the Anya Initiative. Not a church. Not a rally. The location, a refurbished warehouse surrounded by oak trees converted into a hybrid space, part lecture hall, part meditation center, part maker lab. No crucifixes, no altars, no dogma, just a circular stage surrounded by chairs of all kinds, folding beanbags, even recycled car seats. On the walls, murals of black holes, beside lines from Rumi, quantum equations next to verses from Psalms. At the entrance, a sign in plain font. Wonder is welcome here. Leave your labels at the door. The guests arrived. They came quietly. A young coder who lost her father to addiction and never trusted God again. A philosophy professor who once burned his Bible in protest, now carrying a notebook full of questions. An ex-megachurch pastor who had walked away when his daughter came. How-to rabbi, a robotics engineer, a nurse, a teenager with a shaved head and a tattoo that read, "Prove it." And somewhere among them, Elon Musk and Cassandra Knox seated side by side. They weren't leading the night. They were just part of it. Cassandra speaks. She took the mic without a script. If someone told me a year ago, I'd be standing here in a building funded by Elon Musk, talking about wonder and belief in the same sentence, I would have laughed. Nervous laughter echoed around the room, but something shifted, not because I found answers, but because I stopped being afraid to ask questions out loud. She scanned the room. You're not here for certainty, you're here for honesty. So let's start there. Elon's turn. He didn't stand on the stage. He walked into the crowd, mic in hand, like he was pitching a startup. We've built rockets to reach Mars. AI that can outthink us. But we still haven't figured out how to sit across from someone who believes differently and not want to destroy them. He paused. Maybe that's the final frontier. The crowd was dead silent. What if faith and science aren't in conflict, but in conversation? What if this isn't about proving who's right, but learning what makes us human? The mic is passed. They passed the mic, literally, to anyone who had the courage to speak. A young woman stood up. She had scars on her arms and a necklace shaped like a neuron. I tried to end my life 2 years ago. I didn't believe in anything. But last week I saw the interview, and for the first time I thought, maybe I'm not broken, just still building. A boy no older than 16 raised his hand next. My parents are atheists. My school is Catholic. I always felt like I had to choose, but this feels like a third way. Tears, not performance, release. No viral clips. On purpose phones were turned off. Cameras banned. No trending hashtags. No press invites. The moment wasn't for likes. It was for life. And as the night deepened, something truly miraculous happened. People who should have never sat in the same room began to trust each other. A quiet benediction. Father Callahan stood in the back. Quiet, smiling. He didn't pray out loud. He didn't have to. The silence was the prayer. Later, that night, as Elon walked Cassandra to her car, he asked softly, "You think this'll last?" She looked up at the stars. "Only if we don't try to control it. Only if we let people wrestle." Elon nodded, thinking of Jacob from the Bible, the man who wrestled with God and walked away limping. Maybe limping is the proof we were there. They laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because it was real. The world was watching quietly. Though cameras weren't present, the ripples were undeniable. Emails flooded in, letters, hand-drawn pictures from kids, anonymous donations, and a short note mailed from somewhere in Montana. I lost my faith, but I never lost my hope that someone else would find theirs and let me borrow it until I was ready. Signed, a stranger, still searching. It started with a whisper, a conversation in a dusty warehouse under Texas stars, a moment without cameras, without scripts, but the echo of that whisper was louder than anyone expected. A shift in the culture within weeks. The story of the Anya initiative began to ripple outward, not because Elon Musk tweeted it, not because Cassandra Knox hosted a tell-all, but because people began talking to each other differently. Coffee shops in Brooklyn and Boise hosted open circles. Faith and physics. Reddit threads turned into civil debates. TikTok creators began stitching stories, not with sarcasm, but with sincere wonder. And across college campuses, a new sticker started appearing on laptops. Wonder weakness. Cassandra on The Late Show, she reluctantly agreed to appear on one major show, not to promote herself, but to defend the core of the movement. The host, another well-known skeptic, smirked. "So what, you're the PR head for Musk's new church?" Cassandra didn't flinch. "It's not a church, it's a table." "A table?" "Yeah, one with extra seats for everyone." The studio went quiet. I spent years mocking people like Elon. I thought faith meant fantasy, but it turns out the bravest thing isn't building rockets. It's admitting you don't have all the answers, and still showing up to ask more. Elon's quiet moment back at home. Elon stood alone in his study. The room was dim, lit by an old lava lamp and the flicker of an antique candle, one his mother once kept in her garden. On his desk, a stack of letters. Real ones, from parents, students, refugees, thinkers, ex-believers, current searchers. One read, "My daughter died last fall. I stopped believing in anything. But your space, your idea, gave me permission to talk to the sky again. Elon placed the letter in a small wooden box. On the lid, carved by hand, was the word Echoes, a school in Ethiopia. Half a world away, in a dusty village near Addis Ababa, a new school was being built, funded by anonymous donors, some of them from within the Anya initiative. Its curriculum: science, technology, critical thinking, and a class called Big Questions and Beautiful Silence. The children painted a mural on the wall, a rocket ship soaring upward, with the words in Amharic and English, "We ask because we believe." Cassandra. And the cross one morning, Cassandra visited the grave of her grandmother. She knelt, fingers brushing the grass. Around her neck was the small cross she once mocked, not as a statement, not as a branding, but as a memory. And maybe a promise. You were right, Grandma, faith wasn't the end of the journey. It was the question that started it. What came next? They didn't try to scale the initiative like a startup. There were no franchises, no TED Talks, just gatherings, conversations, letters passed between strangers. And every time someone said, "I thought I was the only one," they heard back, "You're not." One final broadcast, Cassandra and Elon sat together again 1 year later, on a modest live stream with a few thousand viewers. No suits, no filters, just Heart Elon. "We're not here to change minds. We're here to open hearts, Cassandra. And maybe, just maybe, remind people that even the loudest doubter can still be surprised." She looked into the camera. "To anyone out there who's lost faith in God, in science, in each other, come sit with us. You don't have to believe yet. You just have to breathe." The final echo. Outside, a child watched the live stream. With her mom, she turned and asked, "Can I believe in science and stories?" Her mom smiled softly. "Yes, baby, that's how we got the stars."